All right, so let's kind of wrap some things up here. So how can we tell if a sequence is arithmetic or geometric? So arithmetic is going to be when you're adding the same thing or subtracting the same thing over and over again. Geometric will be when you're multiplying or dividing by the same number over and over again. All right, so let's just focus on arithmetic for a minute. We know that arithmetic is really the same thing you can think of as a linear function. So let's kind of develop this equation. So an equation for a linear function, if we're talking about a linear function, we know is y equals mx plus b. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this so that it represents an arithmetic sequence. Okay, so we want to change the notation just slightly so that we can tell if we're talking about a sequence versus a linear function. So our sequence, we saw in this presentation that we were using t of n instead of y and n instead of x. So it's just a slight shift from our linear function to our arithmetic sequence. What are the two pieces of information that we need in order to write the equation of an arithmetic sequence? Well, you need to know what you're adding. So we call that our common difference. And your common difference is exactly the same thing as your slope. Okay, so in your equation, your common difference is going to go where m is. All right, and then the second thing we need to know is our zero term. Now this is exactly the same as your y-intercept. So our zero term, whoops, sorry about that. Zero term just goes where b is in our linear or our arithmetic sequence equations. Okay, so now let's talk about a geometric sequence. Now remember, a geometric sequence is just the same thing as an exponential type of equation. So if we have an exponential function, you've probably seen that written as y equals a times r to the x. Just to define a couple of things, r is, your common ratio or your rate of growth. I'll write that here. I think you guys know this. A is, again, your zero term. All right, so that's our exponential function. If we want to write this as a geometric sequence, we're just going to use some different terms. So instead of y, we use t of n, and instead of x, we use n. What two pieces of information do we need? Well, I kind of alluded to that up above. We need to know the rate of growth. That is also known as your common ratio. And that's why we use the letter R. And then the second thing you need to know, just like you need to know in our linear or arithmetic sequence, is your zero term. And that is, in your equation, that is A. I'll just kind of put those there for you. Okay, it's important that you know these and you know the relationship to the linear functions and the exponential functions. So I would put this information down someplace where you can access it at a quick glance, okay? So maybe in the front of a notebook if you're using a notebook, on a Post-it note that you can stick to the front of your notebook or your book or whatever, or your Chromebook, but put these someplace where you can access them pretty quickly.